Kyle, thanks for joining me today. Kyle is part owner at Bamal Fastener, which is a family-owned business, and we're going to get into the dynamics there and his journey growing up with that business, but he's also an investor in a number of small businesses as well. So, Kyle, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, really happy to be here. Grateful for the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So maybe we could start with life growing up around a family business. I remember from our original conversation, you didn't necessarily plan to join the business after college and kind of the journey to today.
That's true. I actually had no plans to, but we'll start back a little further in time than that. So yeah, it was a bit of a journey for my father. So my first memories as a kid were, he worked hard. He was gone a lot. And that's not to say he was a bad dad or anything like that. I had a great relationship with him then, and I do now. But just in the context of having my own family, and it wasn't really until 2001 when he actually went through an exit. He had done a couple acquisitions up until 2001. In 2001, he went through an exit, which came with a 5-year non-compete. So then I got a pretty early education on maybe the downsides, if you will, of business ownership. People think it's going to be kind of passive, and that was not my experience as a kid growing up, and it's not my experience now. Coming out of college, I just had the unfortunate timing of graduating in 2007 from undergrad, and that was right before the 08-09 recession was coming in. So the idea at the time was to just go work for the family business and have it be a stopover till the recession lifted and I could find another opportunity. And that was 18 years ago.
There you go.
So here I am still in the family business.
That's amazing. Let's get into a little bit about what the business does. So it's founded in the 50s, if I remember correctly. Was your dad the one who founded it, or was it his father?
It was his father. So Bamal, Bamal, is very uncreatively just Burke and Miller and Larman. They were the three original partners. The Burkes and the Millers were really more on the operating side. Mr. Larman actually lived in California. He was really kind of more the money man behind it all. But it was founded in the suburban Detroit area. And originally, one of the main ideas was all these ships were docking in the port of Detroit to make their way back around the mitten to Chicago before they'd turn around and go back out the Soo Lock system. Well, they dock with all these manifests of like things that were broken and needed to be fixed before they could disembark. So there was no distribution base at that time. It all had to go out to the manufacturing base. So that was the idea of the three original partners was, well, we know who at the port gets these manifests for what they need to order, and we can go look through the history of them and figure out what we carry, and we can charge more for it, but it'll be on demand. And maybe instead of turning the boat around in 2 or 3 weeks, we can turn it around in 2 or 3 days, which had some value for the shipping company. So that transitioned from that into kind of like a local hardware store as well. And if you really wanted to grow at that time, being in Detroit in the 50s and 60s, it was obviously the automotive companies and their tier group. So I think my dad was the biggest driver out of the group of going into that industry for sales. And that was the large part of the growth trajectory to the company up until 2001.
Okay.
Then there was the sale. Then my brother graduated. I'm partners with my older brother. He's about 18 months older than me. And he graduated college in 2006, which was exactly 5 years after the non-compete expired. So he started in the business then, and I started after college in 2007, about a year later.
That's awesome. How is it working with your brother?
Overall, it's great. Family businesses can be tough, and we certainly have our tough times. It's fun. You're looking this way with the camera, but right on the other side is actually a Jack and Jill bathroom, and then my brother's office is right on the other side. So, we're with each other 4 or 5 days a week, depending on travel schedules. We live maybe about 3 minutes from each other by car. Our kids are roughly the same age. We spend a ton of time together, and we see the world, especially as it relates to business, the same in most areas that matter. And in the parts that's different, it kind of generates more value. He's very focused on our clients and our client relationships and customer service and kind of outward focused on the business and growth. And I'm really more focused internally on our operations and our finances. So where we kind of differ in skill sets,
sure.
That's also where we've evolved to kind of be in our different parts of the business. And then even back to the family nature, it's not just my brother too. My dad still has equity in the business, and he's awesome to have around when there are disagreements, and he can kind of be the tie-breaking vote, if you will. So the dynamic works well. And then really all three of us, if anybody kind of loses out in a strategy decision or situation,
sure,
we're all mature enough to kind of, it's okay. I don't really count it as a loss. It's just my side didn't win the argument, and
sure.
We're all able to kind of like put our feelings aside and just go, well, okay, this is the direction the ship's heading in, even if I didn't want that direction, but I got to grab my oar and paddle just as hard as everybody else. So everybody does that pretty well.
And how does the business look today versus in 2001? I imagine, I mean, just being based in Charlotte, I imagine there's less of a focus on Detroit auto manufacturers.
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct. We never really intentionally went back into the automotive industry. We've got some heavy trucking supply, which really is maybe if you're in the business, but that's really a different market for like goods transport, heavy trucking, manufacturing and supply. Starting with geographically, so we're not in Detroit anymore. Not only has the business moved out of Michigan, but our entire family has. So our headquarters are now Charlotte, North Carolina. When my brother and I were thinking about growing the business, we went through this kind of an iterative process. We said, well, okay, we're out of college, we've got college degrees, and we've got this family company that it had shrunk from, just to make the numbers simple, about 100 million in revenue at the time down to like 10 million in revenue. It was really the non-automotive portion of it, but that's what my brother and I started working on. And it was heavily concentrated in the Midwest. So we're looking at it. We said, well, we want to grow this business. The average education level in the county in Ohio that we were in was 11 and a half grades, or more specifically, a half a year shy of a high school diploma. And that's part of just the generic brain drain out of the Midwest as jobs went to Mexico through NAFTA and kind of got outsourced and offshored. And we just said it's going to be really hard to hire qualified people where we are. So we started looking at places to go. And I'll make a long story short, we chose Charlotte, great schools, great education base, growing city. We had a bunch of customers in the area. We had no presence in the area at the time. So, I mean, strategically, it made a lot of sense. And, from 2001 to today, which was the base of the question, I mean, we have about 5x our top line revenue during that period of time. It's been a combination of organic and acquisition growth. In our industry, the acquisition growth has been probably easier for us. There are a lot of high barriers to entry in our industry, and organic sales can be pretty tough. So we're 5 times the size. We're in different geographic markets than we were. We're not in Michigan anymore. So I mean, lots of differences for sure.
And is it largely distribution, or are you also manufacturing parts? I saw y'all have a location in Mexico.
Yeah, no manufacturing at all. It's all distribution. So we have a global supply chain. As we sit here today, that's obviously kind of a hot topic. So fortunately, we are not really heavily concentrated in China. But I mean, if you go back to 2001 when my brother and I started, there was no way you could be competitive in our industry on the cost of the average SKU that you're buying if you didn't go to China, Taiwan, India, Vietnam. So we have that. That's a part of our lives. And we've had to ride what's going on today before. I mean, this is Trump's second term, and we sort of got a little bit of a playbook the first time around, but it's been more difficult this go around.
Yeah, he's still figuring out his playbook, I think.
Correct. Yeah. So are the rest of us.
Yeah, totally. So when you see stuff like tariffs in the news, mm-hmm. Are you typically essentially pulling forward your demand to buy before they go into effect? And then trying to pass off the cost if it gets realized? Because you're kind of playing this game of like, you don't know if they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because now you're really getting into like the mechanics of how the business works and specifically cash flow, which is important to every business. But I mean, pulling in the inventory works provided that you have the working capital available to do it. Our industry it's a mature product. The margins are not very heavy, and typically you're not sitting on a ton of cash. So it's difficult for us and a lot of our competitors to just say, oh, well, we'll just bring in an extra, couple in, the context for organization that we carry in the neighborhood of $11 million worth of inventory. So even if you were going to uptick it by 10, 20%, you're talking 2.2, 4.4 million. I mean, it's a lot. So, I mean, we didn't really do that. The other, it becomes a force majeure item. It's a force greater than ourselves. We didn't want this price increase to occur, but we don't have any control over, the United States tariff policy. So
sure,
it's a little bit strange in that it gives us, I don't want to say pricing power, but it's just a very rote, like, hey guys, this is what the tariff is. And this is how we have to adjust your prices to offset it. But I don't want to say it's not difficult in terms of the actual work involved. Certainly a lot of our clients want to start talking about, are there any secondary or tertiary sources of supply? Hey, we're in China. Can we look at Vietnam? Can we even bring it to the United States? One of the difficulties that we have with that in the short term is it's just a lot of CapEx to start building a factory, buying machines, training people. I mean, you're looking at probably minimum, in my opinion, 4 or 5 years from even having a building up with machines in it to make the stuff. Forget hiring a qualified workforce and like delivering products. So this really just is like, we just got to deal with whatever the price of the goods are landed.
Sure. Your formal title is CFO, but your company, Bamal, makes a number of acquisitions itself. So much so that even on the website, I think y'all have a section that kind of highlights what you look for in an acquisition. Do you mind sharing how that inorganic growth fits into the strategy?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to what I touched on earlier in the call. So the barriers to entry are almost related to the tariff situation. I mean, you need a lot of capital to invest in the inventory to support the clients that we try to chase. Another barrier is typically they're looking for local sources of supply. So there'd be capital needed to procure that or sign a lease. And then the other entrenched nature of your clients are all of the products that we sell are an engineered solution that are approved by our customers' quality department. So that source of supply, all of tolerances on whatever the fasteners that we're selling. So it isn't as if you can snap your fingers and go find another supplier for this product. So it's really hard to grow organically because you got to convince a client to test out all the fasteners you want to sell them, run them through a pre-production approval process. And I mean, that could cost a client hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the list of stuff that they're going to buy. So typically when they're putting a bunch of product out to market, they're just kind of trying to price test the market, and then they'll go back to their existing supplier to kind of beat them up on price. So if you really want market share, the easiest way to do it is to buy up the competition. So we have taken a look at the acquisition strategy and said, well, there's some risk there, like there isn't anything. So we like our acquisition targets to be of a size that if the deal went poorly or was not as represented, it's not really going to, I mean, maybe to use a kind of crude analogy, like, hey, maybe we take a shot to the leg, but we're going to survive the injury. It wasn't like you took a 12 gauge to the chest, you know?
Sure.
So we try to look for companies that are, between 5 and 15 million top line. And, in our industry, if you're pushing 20% to the bottom line, I mean, that's a really healthy company, usually more in the 15% range. And then we look for geographic diversity. We try to find customer diversity. We actually find that typically a lot of the vendor base is not very diverse. I mean, fasteners have been made the same way for forever. There isn't a ton of new technology in the production space. So you can actually strengthen your vendor relationships, but get customer and geographic diversity out of the acquisition targets. And it's been a more successful growth strategy. We've gone the other route and hired salesmen and tried to go at the inorganic growth, and we still do. We want to make sure we service all of our clients well, and we're always chasing it. It's just really, really hard to get somebody to switch suppliers.
Sure. In addition to leading acquisitions for BAML, you've also started to build your own SMB portfolio of minority investments and other operating businesses. How did that first come across your radar?
Well, personally, I mean, I was go back to 2015, and it was just a different story in our family's business. We were not really growing at the time. We hadn't grown in a while, but it was also exiting the Great Recession. And as from a familial standpoint, if you're looking at work that way, still me, my dad, and my brother, we were all getting married and having kids. Our needs for kind of capital and income growth out of the business were going to grow, and the business wasn't. So at that time, I started looking at it and just saying, well, I might not have as long of a future here as I thought, especially if I wanted to accomplish my personal goals. So that was the first time that my mind had really opened up to like, all right, well, how could I go do this somewhere else? And we had already gone through 2 acquisitions at that time. So I sort of had a feel for how they worked and getting through LOI and getting through due diligence. And I just thought, well, I could do that. I had the fear, like a lot of people do, of like getting outside of an industry that I know. So, okay, I do distribution and we specialize in fasteners. But what would I know about selling ice cream or even in the distribution space, like produce and frozen foods has a whole other raft of concerns. So I had that nervousness about going and doing it on my own, but I still wanted exposure to growth outside of these traditional distribution industries that we played in. So I thought, especially when you get to like a platform like MainShares, it really solves a lot of those problems. I mean, to the extent that you're qualified as an investor, you've got vetted company opportunities, vetted people to come in and run them. And when you're in kind of an LP situation, I really would like to help some of these companies just from a guidance standpoint in a board role. But I'll even go back to the beginning of the call. I mean, I have a day job I'm sitting in my office right now.
Sure.
I don't really necessarily have the time to unplug fully and fully plug into another opportunity. So it really gets you exposure to something that I've always been interested in, but not in a way that really has like full demands on my time.
How do you view that industry hurdle? Because on the one hand, it's diversification because you're investing in a company that's not in the distribution space. On the other hand, you're trying to quickly come up to speed on, like, for instance, I know you invested in a marketing agency. Like, how does that world work? What is good versus great in terms of operating businesses there?
So it starts with the due diligence materials. I mean, it's interesting being in the fastener business. Margins aren't great. I don't think there's any secret there. But then you can go look at a marketing company and see what its operating margins are, and you think, wow, at some point it's a little bit of the joke of like, well, why am I going to work every day and trying to sell fasteners? This looks a little more lucrative.
Sure.
So there's the due diligence side of it kind of gives you comfort for just the generic reliance on, well, these companies exist. And they continue to exist, and the need for them and the economy still exists. And then part of the due diligence is also looking at the operators, especially on main shares, that you can get paired with, and they're a huge part of the communication relative to the opportunity. And when you can look at their resume, when you can talk to them, you can in 2025, you can get on Twitter, you can get on YouTube, you can find their records from whatever college they went to. In some cases, these guys have played sports. I mean, you're looking at somebody that you can very quickly see, like, this is a real person. They've had a real career. Finding, typically, even at Bamal, when we go through acquisitions, finding the person to run it is usually one of the biggest hurdles. So if you've got an operator that has experience in the industry that is not my core, but you've got somebody that it is their core, that makes me feel pretty good about getting over my personal unfamiliarity with the industry.
Sure. Do you have any tactics or tips that you would share for folks considering investing in small business acquisitions?
It's taken me a long time to even get to where I'm at with main shares. I had some personal exposure to it professionally, which that's hard to come by in some cases if you don't have the luck that I had being part of my family's business. But my advice would just be start somewhere. I mean, some of these, even on main shares, I mean, there are opportunities where the minimum check size they're looking for could be $10,000, which, I mean, it's a lot of money, but in the context of, in some cases, I mean, they're raising millions of dollars of equity, and they, for obvious reasons, they want larger checks. So, I mean, just start somewhere, start small, and that you can look at it as a learning opportunity. But I mean, if you're nervous about it, there really is no trading the education that you get when you wrote a check, and then you're in the game. So my advice would just be to get in the game as soon as possible. I candidly too, I mean, I wish that knowing what I know about it now, that I had started this kind of activity like back in my 20s. I mean, I turned 40 this last December. And we've done some acquisitions at my family's business, but I personally didn't really start getting into it until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And what I feel like is, like, I left 10, 15 years of good compounding growth on the table just for lack of familiarity with it.
Yeah, and lower multiples as all of these private equity shops kind of come down market.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, Kyle, thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, it's been great. Really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to talk with you.